Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this video. Today we're going to be talking about step 5 in our overseeding process, and that's going to be how to water your newly overseeded lawn, and also a little bit about my above ground system that I'm going to be using to complete this. So stay tuned for more. Let's preface this first part of this video by saying if you already own some sprinklers of any type, an impact or maybe just kind of a fanning oscillating sprinkler, then there's definitely no need to go buy something new. We can complete this process with any kind of sprinkler. However, if you don't have a sprinkler system, an in-ground one, and you're maybe looking to get something similar above the ground that you can move around that's not permanent, then that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit in this video as well. So last year when I completed my overseeding, I decided to experiment with an above ground system, and it's going to be using these Hunter Pro sprays, but you could use any kind of in-ground sprinkler if you would like. So what I did was a friend of mine kind of mentioned to me that it would probably be possible to put these on a spike, hook up some hoses, and use these above ground so that they're able to be moved around, they're not permanent, and you don't have the cost of putting in an in-ground sprinkler system. So we experimented with that a little bit, and this season I've been doing a little bit more experimentation by using them to water regularly, not just for seeding, and things have really been turning out well. So let's go over this really quickly on what I did to build this. I just took these Hunter Pro sprays. This is a 4-inch, and then you just need a little bit of a riser to connect to this here. And from there I just bought some sprinkler spikes, which I will have a link to everything that I did to build this in the description below. But we're just going to connect all that together. I like to use thread tape to make sure that all the connections don't leak. And then you just need to buy some kind of head for this thing, which I'm using the MP rotators. So that's also by Hunter, and it's a rotating head that puts out water at various different lengths so that we get everything equal. It also puts out water slowly and evenly so that we get good coverage. We don't just throw a bunch of water onto the yard where it kind of runs off and it doesn't use it properly. So after you put those heads in, we have the riser there, we have the spike. Then I just found some cheap hoses that you can get pretty much at any home improvement store, whatever's the cheapest. I got some 25-foot hoses from Menards for like $9 or $10 a piece. So you get a couple of those to string these together, and then so with my water pressure that I have, these don't take an extreme amount of water pressure. I can usually string out 3 to 4 of them fairly well and cover an area in my yard. So that's the reason why I use these, and I've been finding that they've been working very well for me. So if you want to find out a little bit more about that build, if you're curious about it, I do have a video that I completed last fall on that with maybe a little bit more in-depth information on it. I'll have that in the description as well. So check that out, and now I'm going to set up these sprinklers real quick and show you how I use them in my yard. So as you can see, you can just work on the placement of these in your own yard, but you can set them at different angles, you can set them at different distances, and depending on what MP rotator head you buy, this will depend on how far it sprays the water. You can do a little bit more research on those actual heads if you want to figure out what exactly you need to buy, but for me, I pretty much just buy the ones that spray 30 feet, and then I just adjust them accordingly, and then just get good overlap from the other sprinklers I have hooked up, and this seems to cover the area very well and very evenly. So now if you're using this system, or you want to build something like this, or you have an in-ground sprinkler system, or you maybe have some impacts, or you have some oscillating sprinklers, whatever you have, this process is going to be pretty much the same for what we're going to do next, which is we want to water this seed in multiple times a day, keeping it wet without getting it too over soaked. We don't want water running all over the place or taking our seed away, but we also don't want to let it dry out. So for me, we've been really warm here this fall and we haven't had any rain, but hopefully for you, if you're getting some dew in the morning, which I am as well, and then that will hold on until about maybe 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the morning. Once I see that starting to dry off, I normally do a watering at that point. And because I don't have an in-ground sprinkler system, I have to go around and manually turn on hoses, and everything's pretty much set in place. So I just have to go over and manually switch that over at some point. So if you have an in-ground sprinkler system, this would be fairly easy. You just set your sprinklers to run multiple times a day in your various zones. If you don't and you need to move things around, if you're just using maybe an impact sprinkler or an oscillating sprinkler in your yard, then you're just going to have to go out and be very careful and move it around. I've used impact sprinklers in the past and those work okay as well. The reason that I didn't use that this time is that I just felt like it would be a little bit too harsh. The water comes out of impacts a little bit bigger drops, and it can come down a little bit heavier and actually move your seed away from where you want it to be. If you didn't have a lot of bare spots in your yard like I did, you can really get away with impacts no problem. I don't personally like oscillating sprinklers too much just because they are really affected by wind, and when you use them then you don't get even coverage all the time and it's kind of a pain to use. But essentially, again, just water this in multiple times a day. I would water around 11 to noon, somewhere in there, right around sometime in the mid-afternoon if possible, while the sun is the highest and while things are the warmest. And then once we get to the evening, we're getting shorter daylight hours at this time too. Things will usually cool off and you'll get a little bit of dew on the lawn, and that's going to help hold the moisture all the way until the next day. So the big thing with watering is just to make sure we have as even coverage as possible, and that we can just continue to water this until we see good germination, good growth, and then we can kind of taper it off as things grow in, so we can water a little bit heavier, maybe every other day. It's all going to depend on what kind of rain you get, what kind of heat you have going on in your area, and also how quickly this seed comes in for you, depending on your seed type. So normally, like I mentioned, I'll have 4 to 5 days where I'll start to see the seed come in, and then from there, once it gets tall enough to mow, I'll start to adjust my watering down a little bit so I'm not watering so frequently and so lightly. I'll want to water a little bit heavier, and hopefully we also get some rain to help us out through that process. So thank you very much for joining me for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.